as a possible terror attack. The former NYPD commissioner, Bill Bratton, on television about an hour ago saying that he sees so far there is evidence suggesting this appears to be ISIS-inspired. This is what he said on that.
Preliminary information from police sources, and I emphasize your world, my former world, preliminary, subject to change. It is a man in his middle 20s, probably, possibly from Bangladesh, been in the country about 7 years, who supposedly was setting the device off in the name of ISIS. So definitely a terrorist attack, definitely intended.
Rick Leventhal at the scene in Midtown Manhattan. Rick, good morning to you. And I remind everyone that this happened at 7:30 a.m. Eastern time was the first report of that explosion happening. That is prime rush hour, especially in Midtown Manhattan, Rick.
Yeah, and you're looking at heavily armed NYPD officers who are on scene here on 8th Avenue. We're just north of the Port Authority bus station where this incident occurred less than an hour and a half ago. Apparently in a pedestrian walkway underneath the streets of New York City, an individual with a device that we're told looked like a pipe bomb and some sort of detonator set that device off either intentionally or accidentally, considering, according to the NYPD, there may only be one injury, and that injury may be to the bomber himself. So it's entirely possible that either it went off too early or it wasn't a very significant or sophisticated device, so apparently just one injured. But the NYPD is still working this, obviously, and there is a news conference coming up shortly with Commissioner Jimmy O'Neill and the mayor and the governor all gathering here just off the heart of Times Square where this incident occurred a short time ago. I have been given a name by a member of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I'm 100% on this name. But I'm not giving the name of the bomber just yet because they are obviously investigating this case and they want to see who this person is connected to, whether there's a bigger web here that needs to be untangled. So while they work their end of it, we can tell you that authorities are on scene. They think this was an isolated incident. There is at least one injury, which may well be the bomber, who is in custody at this hour. And again, we hope to learn more when the NYPD hold a news conference here shortly.
Yeah, and NYPD is reporting that the only injury is the suspect that they have in custody. But when you look at that area you're standing in, Rick, that is one of the most populated areas of New York City, and I know that there's major closures. People are going to have a hard time getting to work this morning. What are you seeing on the scene there?
Well, you know, I walked here, Sandra, about 30 blocks, and the streets were pretty chaotic. Traffic wasn't moving in most directions. A lot of the side streets are completely packed, and many avenues, including 8th Avenue right now, is shut down. We'll give you a look at some commuters here who are walking, no doubt walking to work because buses are stopped, trains are stopped, and there's really only way to get there, and that's with your feet. So it's definitely a crazy Monday morning, a very great inconvenience for the folks here, but thank God it wasn't worse with someone setting off some sort of explosive device underground in a pedestrian walkway in the Port Authority bus terminal, which is a very, very busy transit hub, especially on a Monday morning. So the area is locked down, and it's pretty tough to get around. But it appears, at least so far, that this is an isolated incident with one person with one device that did, in fact, explode at about 7:40 this morning.
Still a lot we don't know at this point. Rick Leventhal, thank you.
We're bringing Buck Sexton right now, former CIA officer, and he worked counterterrorism here in New York City as well. Buck, good morning to you.
Good to see you, Bill.
Just give us a sense of what the authorities are doing right now. You're 90 minutes into this, Buck.
Well, they're trying to make sure there are no follow-on plots, that this wasn't part of a cell, that there aren't other individuals who would be trying to set off what would be a complex terror attack. Fact of the matter is, from what we know right now, it seems like we got lucky with this one, with no deaths reported. The only injury may have, in fact, been the would-be suicide bomber, but they have to track down the possibility of another attack and also look at any enablers, anyone who was complicit, part of what we would call a cluster, individuals around him who may have known or should have known, and do they know anyone else who has radicalized as well? I just want to note, Bill, that a couple of weeks ago for thehill.com, I wrote a piece, a terror warning piece, about how the chatter going into the holidays and all the pro-ISIS forums and all the different jihadi cyber points of gathering was just off the charts. And in fact, they were sending around a couple of weeks ago in pro-ISIS forums a photo, or it was a doctored image, of Santa Claus next to dynamite in Times Square, and saying that we meet at Christmas in New York soon. So this is not surprising that somebody may have self-radicalized and acted on what were essentially instructions passed along from the Islamic State to all of its adherents.
I think the location is interesting. I know Rick Leventhal is reporting on a few facts here that we'll wait to confirm further with this press conference. But Port Authority has bus lines that come in from New Jersey. And if you think about the truck terror from Halloween, he came in from New Jersey. You think about the pipe bomb that hit Chelsea on a Saturday night, he came in from New Jersey. That was September of 2016. Far be it for us to draw conclusions right now, but point being, this is a part of New York City where you do not have to live and work in Manhattan. You can come from the outside. How do you prepare for that? How do you guard against that?
Very little that can be done here, Bill. Realistically, against a soft target like the Port Authority bus terminal, it also is in the environs of Times Square. So this is a choke point for all of New York City. People are coming and going in huge numbers, and therefore it poses both a tremendous security challenge as well as is a very sizable target. And so this is why you've had failed attempts in the past in this area. You mentioned the Chelsea bombing. There was the attempted Times Square bombing of 2010 by Faisal Shahzad. In that case, if he had built a better bomb, there might have been dozens, perhaps even hundreds of casualties. From what we see today, it looks like that is also the case, that the bomber's ineptitude in building his device may have been the single biggest factor in this not turning into a mass casualty event.
You look at the subways right now, it's rare not to see someone dressed in NYPD blue who's staking out a subway station, especially during the holidays. You try to get around a Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center. In my 15 years in this city, I have never seen security this tight around Midtown Manhattan as it is now. Have you?
No, the NYPD is taking as seriously as it possibly can the possibility of more terror attacks like this. Look, the Islamic State is in a state of collapse in Iraq and Syria right now, and there's a mentality among jihadis that something has to be done here to turn around that momentum, to make it seem as though there's still a relevance for this idea of global jihad. And that includes those who have no connectivity to the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda, but just have self-radicalized at home. They know the holidays is a particularly heightened time to try and hit us and to try and cause casualties. So this incident is not the only one that we have to be concerned about in the weeks ahead. The NYPD is preparing as best they can for it, and fortunately they are as good as it gets when it comes to this.
What was the phrase we came familiar with, flash to bang?
Yeah, well,
during the truck terror of Halloween, that's from the moment the plot is hatched to the moment it's carried out, becomes less and less. And the reason for that is that the terrorists and the bad people want to do harm know that these authorities are watching very carefully. Last answer on that.
Yeah, the reality here is that it's a good thing that this individual did not try and engage in a vehicle strike and just run through a big crowd of people. He thought he could build a bomb. He couldn't. And as a result, we're not counting bodies this morning, which is a good thing for all involved. And certainly we're going to have to keep vigilance up because this is not going away anytime soon, Bill.
Buck, don't go far, okay? Buck Sexton here in the studio with us. Sandra has more now.
Congressman Pete King is a member of the House Homeland Security Committee. He joins us now by phone. Congressman King, thank you for coming on with us. Have you been able to confirm anything about the suspect in this attack and his possible links to terror?
Well, I've heard things unofficially, including where he's from. Having said that, they're going right now through the terror watch list to see what his connections are, if any. And I can just assure you that the FBI, the NYPD, the Joint Terrorism Task Force in New York are just drilling down on this intensely right now. It's bad enough that he attempted this attack. If this is all it is, that's a good sign. If it's part of a coordinated effort, that's what has to be really looked into in every way to head off any future attacks. Also, is this part of a cell operating in New York? And I know as far as I know, there was no specific threat to New York at this time of the year. However, New York is always on high alert because it is the #1 terrorist target, certainly in this country. There's been over 20 attempted attacks in New York City. And again, we're just, last year we had Chelsea. Last month we had the down by the World Trade Center. So they are on high alert. And right now, I think it's too early to come to any final conclusion other than this certainly appears to be at least terrorist-inspired. And it's important that before anyone gives out the name of this person, rather than tip anybody else off, to do is, again, do a dragnet, do a full-court press, and really just run this down all the way.
Well, and of course, we're going to learn a lot here probably in the next few minutes. We'll bring that to our viewers as we learn and confirm them, the details of that suspect. But just moments after the attack, former NYPD Commissioner Bratton was able to say at least this, that this person carried out the planning of this attack in the name of ISIS. Is that in line with what you have heard?
I've been hearing that. Again, I've not heard it officially, but that's what I've been hearing. And this has all the earmarks, all the hallmarks of either something that's controlled by ISIS, inspired by ISIS, or an Islamist sympathizer. Again, New York has had a wide range of attacks. It's had coordinated attacks, it's had planned attacks, it's had lone wolves, it's had, again, there are, unfortunately, a number of ISIS supporters, Al-Qaeda supporters, Islamist terrorist supporters in New York. Percentage-wise, it's small, but number-wise, listen, again, we've had over...
Well, it might be small, Congressman. People watching this and hearing people say, well, maybe we're lucky this time. No one killed. The only person injured appears to be the suspect. Some might say there's a major concern then that even this attack, while it may be muted, will inspire others.
Absolutely. Listen, that's why New York, sometimes politicians, the media, criticize the NYPD. They feel that they're too heavy-handed, they're too much of a presence, they have too much of an intelligence unit operating. Listen, we live in the middle of this. The NYPD, more than anyone, knows how real this threat is. They can never let their guard down. We have avoided so many terrible attacks over the years by minutes and hours. There was an attempted subway attack in 2009 that would have killed hundreds of people. There was the attempt in Times Square. There was Chelsea last year. There was the Brooklyn Bridge attempt. So, no, this is, we tell people to relax and enjoy themselves. But I can tell you, nobody in the NYPD is relaxed and enjoying themselves anytime. Certainly not anybody involved in counterterrorism, because they realize how real this threat is and how there's an enemy amongst us and that we can never, ever let our guard down.
And we're now hearing from the FDNY, Congressman, that a total of 4 injuries have been reported at the scene of this explosion at Port Authority. Also for our own Fox News reporting, Catherine Herridge reporting that the National Counterterrorism Center is monitoring the situation happening on the ground here in New York City. Going back to Bratton's remarks, he suggested, I look back in June, that Europe-style terror attacks are coming to America soon. Mm-hmm. And it makes you wonder, are we doing the right things to prevent more attacks on American soil and to prevent those kind of attacks from coming here? When it comes to the president, are we employing the right strategies?
Well, I think the president is. I think we have to attack them overseas. We have to have very strict security here at home. We need the extra vetting. We need to have monitoring. We need to have surveillance. We can't afford to be politically correct. This is the example of, like we said, this appears to have been luck. If that guy had made it into a subway car, if that explosion had gone off, it could have been God knows how many people killed. So we're always that close to a disaster.
Congressman, I'm going to have to leave it there, but I do want to ask you before I let you go, are we going to be seeing any changes to security levels in New York City with New Year's Eve approaching and the holidays and hundreds of thousands of people planning their trips to this island of Manhattan? Are we making any changes?
Well, I can assure you that Commissioner Jim O'Neill is the best. They're doing everything they have to do. They will do more. They're always on high alert, but they can always go higher. NYPD is the best in the world at what they do.
All right, very good. Congressman Pete King, we appreciate you coming on. We'll probably talk to you again soon. Thank you.
You were discussing that. We're waiting a press conference with the mayor and the governor, police commissioner here in New York City. We are moments away, we believe, from getting that information. Certainly a big source of information right now, early on now. We are not 2 hours into this. First report, 7:30 Eastern time on a platform below Port Authority, just about a block west of Times Square. Buck Sexton with us as well. And Buck, you've been working the phones there. I've been watching you on email as well. There is a photo right now that's circulating circulating on the internet. We don't have access to it. We're not going to share it with our viewers. It is graphic. It shows a man down, I would guess he's probably mid to late 20s, with dark hair, and you can see clearly a shirt that had covered his stomach has been removed, and there are charred black marks on his abdomen level. If all that appears to be what it is, then he did indeed have some sort of explosive device on his body, and either he set it off or it went off prematurely, but that man right now is in custody.
Bill, the reality is that that whenever somebody tries to build a suicide vest, there's a skill level involved in it. And if we're talking about, and that's what's most likely here, if we're talking about somebody who was self-radicalized and therefore had no connections with any known extremist groups anywhere, wouldn't have likely had the exposure to bomb making in a first-hand expert fashion. And so he may have, I would say, looks very likely that he tried to create an improvised explosive device, an IED, and create what we would have called an S-vest, a suicide vest with it, and it did not detonate properly or as intended. This reminds me in that way of the so-called underwear bomber, Farouk Abdul-Muttalib, who tried to bring down an entire airliner on Christmas Day back in the first year of the Obama administration, if memory serves. His device could very well have been catastrophic for that plane, but it did not go off as intended. It injured him severely, and it seems that that is what happened here, too. And it just goes to show that lone wolves and self-radicalized individuals certainly pose a danger, but when they are trying to build devices and engage in more complicated plots, it's more likely they'll fail and perhaps only severely injure themselves in the process. But this all assumes that there's not more members of a cell or people that were trying to help him, Bill. We don't know that yet.
Abdul-Muttalib flying into Detroit, Michigan on Christmas Day. Buck, hang on one moment. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy with me now from the Hill. And, sir, good morning to you. I know you were in New York City over the weekend, I do believe. What more do you want to add on what we're learning on this? Well,
I think what's really important right now is that we gather all the information. Let the authorities get the information from this individual, making sure that there is not a cell. But we all know the NYPD is one of the finest first responders there is. They've been approached by this before, and they've done an excellent job. Gathering the information is key right now. This could have been a much worse situation from the information we're gathering today. But let's let the authorities do their work and make sure we go about that this does not happen anywhere else.
Yeah, amen to that. Listen, it is a season of heightened concern, and I have seen you here in New York City in the last month. You've been here several times. What is your observation on this past trip that you took notice of with regard to security? Because it's pretty obvious. Street corners, subways, and on it goes.
You know, my family, we were there this weekend, and we were down by the tree, and I looked to the side. The amount of police presence, but it wasn't just a police officer. They were in full gear. They had the weaponry if there was a situation there that they could take care of the situation. They also were able to, in a way, have the protection of the corralling of the crowds, to control them in the process. I mean, they understand what they're up against, and it seems that they're very prepared to deal with it. Another situation that you see here with this bomber not being successful, but also being alive, that's important to gather that information from them. So I know what the authorities will be doing in the next few hours. Gather that information from this individual so we can make sure this does not happen again, or if there's any cell, we will find it.
Kirstjen Nielsen was just sworn in last week as the new Department of Homeland Security Secretary. How much do you know about her record and what she brings to this job?
Well, remember who she worked for before, General Kelly. So she understands this job very well. She understands what needs to get done. And think about it, the president has already been briefed. His chief of staff is General Kelly himself, who was in that job, but also in the situation, the job they had before, also with General Mattis and others in McMaster's. This is I think from a foreign policy team, one of the very best teams I've seen from an administration. And I have full support in them and what they've been able to do. Look at the successes that they've been taking to ISIS around the world. They are shrinking. Look what Iraq just recently announced, being able to push them out. Look at the collapse within Syria. I know they will lash out in other places, but this is why we must be prepared every place around the world.
Thank you, sir. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy there with us, and we shall talk later in the week. Much more on the agenda there in D.C. before you break for the holiday. Thank you for your time. Kevin McCarthy there in Washington, back here in New York City. Bill Hemmer along with Sandra Smith as our ongoing coverage continues here. And as we await the police commissioner and the mayor and the governor, they are oftentimes a really good source of information for us to pass along to our viewers. So that's coming up in a moment, Sandra.
And also, Catherine Herridge giving us an update from Washington saying we're expecting a statement now shortly from Secretary Kristen Nielsen, who, as you remember, was just sworn in last week as the 6th Secretary of Homeland Security. So an update there. And she also confirmed that this is being investigated as a terrorist attack here in New York City. Bill, I can't tell you enough, 9:21 a.m. Eastern time. I mean, this city is shut down as a result of what happened about 2 hours ago. Major arteries into this city have been shut down. The NYPD doing anything they can to answer all the unanswered questions that we have at this moment.
This map is critical, too, for viewers watching us here across the country and around the world. You could go right to the middle of that map, and that's Times Square. And you move just one avenue to the west or the left side, and that's Port Authority. And Sandra, 42 and 8th Avenue. Boy, that is chock-a-block for morning rush hour, for evening rush hour. In this time of the year, it is crowded all day long. You just can imagine how many people are moving through that part of New York City at 7:30.
And I asked Pete King about security measures that may change in the next couple of weeks because, Bill, you're also talking about the area for the ball to drop in New York City, which is going to attract, as you know, huge crowds. So we'll see what happens between now and then. And we want to bring in former New York City Police Commissioner Howard Safer. He joins us now by phone. Commissioner, thank you for coming on with us. This is obviously a situation none of us wanted to wake up to this morning. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, this unfortunately is the new normal. We are now faced with having been successful in defeating ISIS overseas, as they call for a worldwide jihad against Americans. You're going to see more and more self-radicalized people. The good news here is that the injuries appear to be minor, and we do have the subject. So we're going to get a treasure trove of intelligence as we speak. Joint Terrorist Task Force officers from the FBI and the NYPD doing everything they can to find out who this person is, who he's connected with, where he got his explosives. The other good news is it appears to be a malfunction, so he didn't get on a crowded train. But, you know, unfortunately, it's very hard to stop these kinds of incidents.
Do you fear more attacks like this in New York City that may be more successful?
I do fear more attacks. There's no better first responders than the New York City Police Department and the Fire Department, along with the FBI. But, you know, millions and millions of people use our public transportation. It's not possible to stop every one of them. We look for people to, if they see something, say something, if they see something suspicious. But, you know, when you have thousands and millions of tourists crowding, Fifth Avenue and the subways and Times Square, it is a daunting task. You know, the terrorists only have to be right once. We have to be right 100% of the time. And that's the challenge that we're facing.
We're looking at live shots of authorities on the ground there, NYPD, fire department, police detectives. What is this investigation? What is the process like at this moment?
Well, at this moment, you know, after we made sure that we've mitigated the situation, and preservation of life, of course, is the number one thing that we're interested in. But right now, we have people going to this individual's residence, looking at whoever he's associated with, running his name through every possible database, both here and overseas, to try and find out, is this a lone operator? Is this somebody associated with a radical group? Are there others that we need to look at who may be planning similar events? This investigation is just at its very beginning, but there are going to be literally thousands of officers involved.
How will the suspect be handled that is now in custody?
Well, you know, right now I understand he's injured. He'll be taken for medical treatment. He'll be, there'll be a determination made by somebody on whether he's going to be treated as a criminal or whether he's going to be treated as an enemy combatant. And that determines how much we can interrogate him or not. If we treat him as a criminal and he suddenly says that he wants his lawyer, we're going to have a hard time getting anything from him. On the other hand, if he's treated as an enemy combatant, we can continue to talk to him.
Should he be treated as an enemy combatant, based on what
I
you know?
believe he should, but of course that's a big debate among lawyers and civil rights activists. And but I believe, we are at war, and when we're at war, we should treat the enemy as enemy combatants, not as criminals. This could have been an enormous tragedy, and we're very lucky that it was not.
When you say that, as someone who knows so much and has seen so much as the former NYPD police commissioner, that scares people when you say that. I mean, what do you tell families that are planning trips to New York City or other cities in this country that fear these types of attacks? New Year's Eve is approaching. Do you still suggest people travel and go about their lives?
I do suggest that people travel and go about their lives. Once we start changing the way that we operate in our daily lives, the terrorists have won. The fact is, New York is the safest large city in America. The probability of being a victim of a terrorist attack is you're twice as likely to be hit by lightning. So, as terrible as these individual attacks are, people should go about their lives, and, the NYPD and the FBI and other agencies will do what they can to deal with the terrorism. There are no guarantees.
Are we doing the right things to fight this war, as you called it, abroad?
We are doing the right things abroad. We're having tremendous success abroad. But as we do have tremendous success abroad, we have to be cognizant that these individuals are going to start to look to get individuals like this to commit acts of terror in public areas. And, sadly, there's not a lot that we can do about it other than track as many of them as we can until we've eliminated all of them. Terrorism is unfortunately called a never-ending war, and we're going to be dealing with this for many, many years to come. The good news is that, although we've had 2 or 3 in New York over the last few months, it could have been a lot worse.
All right. Former NYPD Police Commissioner Safer, thank you for coming on with us.
Good to be with you.
So this is what we know. Pipe bomb explosion inside the New York City subway happened in an underground passageway. Occurred earlier today, 7:30 Eastern time, between 7th and 8th Avenues along 42nd Street. Now, some parts of the mass transit system here in Manhattan, it is extensive underground, and this is a part of the city where it is just that, extensive. You can walk for a long way underground before you emerge in the street level. Where was this person headed? Was he headed toward Times Square? Which in all likelihood is a strong possibility. Buck Sexton pointed out earlier, reminding us 2 weeks ago, this ISIS-inspired cartoon that had a picture of Times Square with Santa Claus and some sort of explosive cartoon that was scrawled next to it. That caught our attention, and now we reflect on that again today. Whether that is connected or not, we do not know. But the police commissioner is going to brief in a moment here. The Port Authority bus terminal is the country's largest bus hub. That's been shut down. 8 subway lines have been shut down. All the streets around Times Square, they are closed. Law enforcement telling Fox News and the Associated Press that man with a pipe bomb was strapped to him when it went off on or near that subway passage line. Again, I mentioned 7:30 local time. 2 hours previous, the person arrested and apparently has non-life-threatening injuries. Back to Buck Sexton for more on what he's picking up now. You worked a lot here in New York City, Buck, talking to us now about what these authorities are doing at the moment. And what comes to mind now based on the information we're learning?
Well, they're going to be looking at his digital footprint. They're going to be trying to track down everything that they can about who he was in contact with. This is necessary for figuring out how this individual was radicalized. Very possible, I would say even likely, you're going to find a lot of jihadist propaganda on his computers. And then there'll be some questions about whether this was what would be called a remote controlled plot. That's when there's someone who is assigned as a kind of virtual handler for a jihadist cell abroad who tells an individual in a place like America or in Europe, this is how to go about your plot. We don't know, but these are the things that they will be looking to get get a better understanding of. And with this pipe bomb, it's a pretty rudimentary device. It went off prematurely, and it was supposed to be part of a vest, of an S-vest, suicide vest. So these are all standard tactics that we've seen in jihadist cells going back for a very long time, Bill. So if this was someone on his own who had radicalized and decided that he was going to engage in the first successful terror attack in New York City over this holiday season, it would really line up. This would be straight out of the terrorist playbook. And so I think we're going to make sure, or authorities are going to be making sure that that is what happened here, that there are no loose threads. There are no individuals tied to him that could be trying to act on their own. And it's a reminder that for every time that this happens and we don't have a mass casualty incident, there are other individuals out there right now, yes, here in America as well, who are thinking about or perhaps even in the operational phase of a similar plot. So we have to stay on guard.
We are only 45 days removed from the Halloween Day hit. That was the truck terror attack when Saifullah Saipov out of Uzbekistan rented that truck from a Home Depot in New Jersey, killed 8 people, injured 11 more. And what a stunning day that was. Got out of his car yelling Allah Akbar, and it looked to many as if he was trying to get the police to fire on him. He was apprehended, but that was a day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon that stunned this city. And quickly, they moved on his apartment, which was in the parking lot of a mosque near Paterson, New Jersey, a place, Buck, that has been under surveillance for almost 20 years now.
It's possible that this individual today was also tied into some areas of concern or individuals who have popped up before on law enforcement's radar. That's what we're going to be finding out in the next few hours. And that's why the radicalization process here can happen a number of different ways. The assumption usually with lone wolves, Bill, is that it's mostly internet-based, but there could have been what we would call spiritual sanctioners or individuals around him, the attacker today, that were prodding him on to do this. That's why it's a race against the clock. Although anyone who was in that situation is going to try to go to ground and evade authorities now. So police have a lot on their hands.
There is a report that this person was from Bangladesh, unconfirmed. There's a report that he lived in Brooklyn, unconfirmed. All that we're waiting to get more on now, Buck.
Bangladesh has a history of jihadist extremist groups like many other Muslim majority countries. If he's an immigrant, we may hear some of the similar stories we have in terrorist attacks like this in the past, where a recent immigrant becomes disaffected and turns to jihad for a sense of purpose. But that's what I think is most likely.
Buck, thank you. Buck Sexton helping us along the way here, gathering information and reacting to the very latest. Buck, thank you. The headlines
Thanks,
now
Buck.
from New York City as we get them at 9:33 in the morning. You see the microphones there on the street corner and the reporters in front. It's a cold time of the year here in New York City. We are waiting the police commissioner, the governor, and the mayor. They're about to brief reporters and the rest of the viewing public here. So as we do that, I want to pause to let our Fox stations join us around the country here on Fox News. I'm Bill Hemmer. This is Fox News coverage of the explosion in New York City. And on this Monday morning, this is the stunning headline that we awake to now. At 7:30 local time, reports of an explosion beneath the street of the Port Authority, the nation's most crowded bus station, 8th Avenue, 42nd Street, a time where the holidays and the morning commute have converged in an intersection of mayhem and wonder and alarm as we await now the mayor and the governor and the police commissioner tell us what they know at the moment. This is what we believe has taken place. 7:30 local time, the explosion happening beneath the street, a pipe bomb explosion inside the New York City subway during this, the morning rush hour, in the underground passageway that runs between 7th and 8th Avenues. Depending on how that plays out, in all likelihood, that runs along 42nd Street from a west to eastern direction, which may suggest that this killer, that this bomber was headed toward Times Square. This person, however, did not make it there. Some of the pictures online suggest and show that there's some sort of charred stomach as they pulled the shirt up off of this man. Somewhere between 25 and 30 years of age, on the ground. He is alive and apparently suffering from non-threatening life injuries. The Port Authority bus terminal, again, I mentioned the nation's largest bus hub, shut down, along with 8 subway lines in all streets around Times Square. Again, the person arrested is now being treated for his injuries. This follows now an attack 45 days ago on Halloween Day when the truck terror was carried out on Manhattan's West Side, which killed 8 and injured 11. That terror attack also saw the person driving that truck survive and is now being held here in New York City. I'm Bill Hemmer along with Sandra Smith as we await the latest news from the headlines here in New York City.
Good morning. We are awaiting that update from authorities on the ground there. We know this investigation is ongoing and the suspect is in custody. Still waiting to hear more details about him. We are going to be hearing from the police commissioner first. As you can see, they're assembling on the ground. You can see Mayor de Blasio also approaching. The microphone's there. This is set to begin at any moment. And Bill, this will help fill.
Disturbing when you hear about a bomb in the subway station, which is in many ways one of our worst nightmares. The reality turns out better than the initial expectation and fear. You had a number of law enforcement agencies that did a fantastic job. The NYPD, the PAPD, the Port Authority Police, the MTA Police, they were all on it. You see behind us representatives of all the agencies coordinated. The Assistant Director of the FBI, Bill Sweeney, is here. So everyone worked together. There was an explosion. The police commissioner will go over the details. It was an effectively low-tech device. There were several injuries, we hope minor, and it was handled extraordinarily well. There was a disruption in train service and bus service while a sweep was being done. That's all being restored now, as you'll hear from Joe Loda. The subway service, except at 42nd Street, is being restored. The Port Authority bus terminal is reopened, so buses will be running once again. This is New York. The reality is that we are a target by many who would like to make a statement against democracy, against freedom. We have the Statue of Liberty in our harbor, and that makes us an international target. We understand that. With the internet now, anyone can go on the internet and download garbage and vileness on how to put together an amateur level explosive device. And that is the reality that we live with. The counter reality is that this is New York, and we all pitch together, and we are a savvy people, and we keep our eyes open, and that's what See Something, Say Something is all about. And we have the best law enforcement on the globe, and we're all working together extraordinarily well. I want to thank the mayor and the mayor's office for doing a great job this morning. And we will go forward, and we'll go forward together. All the service will resume. Let's go back to work. We're not going to allow them to disrupt us. That's exactly what they want. And that is exactly what they're not going to get. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Governor. Let's be clear, as New Yorkers, our lives revolve around the subways. When we hear of an attack in the subway, it's incredibly unsettling. And let's be also clear, this was an attempted terrorist attack. Thank God the perpetrator did not achieve his ultimate goals. Thank God our first responders were there so quickly to address the situation, to make sure people were safe. Thank God the only injuries we know at this point were minor. But I agree 100% with the governor's point that choice of New York is always for a reason, because we're a beacon to the world, and we actually show that society of many faiths and many backgrounds can work, and and we showed that democracy can work, and our